Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Today, today my guest is Jule Kim. Jule Kim is a lot of things. She has a math degree that she never used. She's a law school dropout. She worked in tech and burned out. So what do all these things have in common? Well, she wasn't afraid to try different things and move on when they weren't working out. One thing she likely isn't moving on from anytime soon is being a life coach. So I'm really interested to learn more about the path that led her to what she currently does. Welcome to Teach the Geek interviews, Jule.
Thank you, Neil. I appreciate you inviting me here.
Yes. So I mentioned that you studied math in school. So what was the motivation to do that?
Well, it's even there, like I think that's kind of a twisty answer. Yeah, it wasn't a straight shot, I didn't go into college saying, "Oh, I'm going to be a math major." I actually entered with the little form you fill out saying what you think your major is going to be, and I had written English. So I entered as an English major, and then by the end of my first semester, I had this reaction. I don't know if it was the atmosphere. I know a lot of it was just maybe too much prejudgment, but I found my peers in my English classes, they just weren't the right kind of vibe that I wanted to be around. Um, yeah, and I remember it was this one assignment I turned in English class, and the professor had given it back saying, it was something like, yeah, this isn't right, and it was because I had taken a perspective that was different to the perspective he taught in class. And he was like, there are no right answers, but really there is a right answer, and you're being dinged for not giving me the right answer. And I was just like, I looked at that and I was like, F this shizzles. I was like, I don't like this. I don't like any part of this. It's like, you know what has clear cut answers? Math. So I'm going to be a math major. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but that's how I ended up there.
Wow. Your story is very reminiscent of my last year of high school. So I remember I had this professor or this teacher, it's because high school, and English teacher, and it was going really well, maybe the first couple of months, but then he left. I think he had some sort of like he had a nervous breakdown or something like that. So he was gone the rest of the year. So we had this substitute. And the substitute, man, Mr. Shaw, I still remember this guy. And we had this assignment where we had to compare the writings of a couple of poets. And I just happened to pick a poet that he was very enamored with. I didn't know that at the time. But man, the guy, he just all the red that was on that on that assignment when I got it back. I guess I again, just kind of like you, I took an opinion that he didn't agree with, I suppose. And that's what really made it concrete to me that I don't think I'm going to be an English major. It's for me. So I mean, you at least made it to that first year of university. I didn't even make it that far. Maybe that's why engineering. That's why I studied in school. Maybe that's why I went with that instead because it's a little more concrete as opposed to somebody saying, well, yeah, there's no right answer, but give me the answer that I want to hear.
Yeah, I think that's rough, man. That's really rough. Okay, so then how did you come to engineering? You know you didn't want to do English, but then what made you choose engineering?
My father said I should do it. For the longest time, Jewel, I used to lie about that because I was embarrassed by the reason. Oftentimes, when you hear people say why they did engineering, there's a interesting story behind it. Maybe they were in robotics club when they were in school. Maybe when they were kids, they took apart toasters and put them back together. I never took apart the toaster. My mother would not have been happy about that. And there certainly was no robotics club at the high school I was at. I mean, I was okay in math and science, and I wasn't really enamored with any subject really. But my father said, you can probably get a good job as an engineer. Do that. And that's what I did.
Sounds like my dad. My dad was my oldest brother. My brother went into computer science, and it was like the same kind of reasoning right there. I'm sure this is a lot of families.
Yeah, yeah. And that's interesting you say that. And I think that is it's I think perhaps it is way more common than I thought it was earlier on because as I said, I used to lie about it because I was embarrassed. But I think it turns out a lot of people go into these types of fields because someone said, well, this is something practical to do. There's a need, you can get paid well, do it. And I didn't have any other ideas. I certainly wasn't going to go into English. So it's like engineering it is. And that's kind of how it's been. Luckily, it worked out pretty well. You know, it's not as if I studied it, hated it, and still went into it reluctantly to work in it. I worked in it for a number of years and I liked the work. It worked out well. All right.
Seems like it, man. That's a cool story. Thank you.
You're very welcome. All right. So now I also mentioned that you went to law school after getting a degree in math. So what was the motivation to do law school?
A little bit, let's just say it's a little bit embarrassing for me too. Um, I remember I was in junior year of college or university, as our Canadian and European counterparts would actually say. You're coming up upon that realization, wait a minute, you're gonna leave college or you're about to graduate soon. And then what's the plan? What's the plan? I started to freak out. I was just like, I have this degree in math. Do I want to be a math teacher? I have no intention of being a math teacher. I was just like, I cannot wait to be done with this program and get out of here. And looking back, I feel like that was the biggest wasted opportunity in my university days because there were so many pieces that were fascinating, but I didn't put in the work. Like, to be honest, I just didn't really put in the work. I was busy like partying or doing what I thought was fun. I barely showed up to classes. And so then if you're asking me like how did I get to law school, it was the fact that I saw all of my peers making plans. So most of them were going on to grad school. I had some people who were, they had their targets set on like a very specific company. I had friends who were like, okay, I'm going to be a CPA and I have to take, these tests. I had one friend who was like, I'm going to be an actuary and I have to take those tests. And I was like, fudge, what is my plan? I have no idea. You know what? I'm going to do law school. So that's kind of ridiculous when I think about it. It's like the most expensive mistake I've ever made in my life. It's not cheap. And, it's just like how universities are. If you go to a law school out of state, then you're going to be slapped with that out of state tuition. So that's what I mean. It's like that 1 year of law school cost me like 50 grand.
Oh man, yeah, that's a costly mistake, all right. But hey, at least you realized that after that first year, this wasn't something for you, and you had the courage to leave because I think a lot of people would have been like, well, I started here. All these people in my family, my friends know that I'm here. I got to finish it. I can't be seen as a failure in front of these people. I don't want them talking behind my back. But maybe you didn't care about that type of thing, and you were just like, look, man, I don't think I could do 2 more years of this. I need to get out of here as quickly as possible. So kudos to you for seeing that and making I'm sure what I'm sure was a tough decision.
Well, here's the other embarrassing part that I don't share too often, if you don't mind me saying this.
Oh, go ahead.
I knew going into law school that it probably wasn't the right choice. And in fact, despite having a dad who told my brother, you should study computer science, my dad actually told me he did not want me to go to law school because he felt like it wasn't the right fit for who I was. And I had like somebody else tell me the same thing too, which is very odd because I am very analytically oriented, like the way I think. That's one gift that graduating with a math degree did give me. So, if anything, I would say going to law school is a natural fit. Like it's a good next step if you want to do that kind of work. But I went into law school already having the sense that it might not work out for me. And instead of being like, you know what, I'm going to take a year to think about this and just like really evaluate whether this is the right decision, I was just like, jump in with both feet, commit, move across the country to this other school, to Iowa, of all places. Not a fun place to be when you're not white. um, yeah. So, like, what really got me to quit it was like a what do you call it? Like an intersection of circumstances. So I had a really bad breakup in the first year of law school too. And so I think had that not happened, that perhaps I would have been able to ignore the warning signs within myself and just keep going, like what you said. But because of the breakup and also having to see that person every day at school, like it was just it was too much. Like it was more than I can handle. So that's when I chose to ask the school if I could go on leave for a semester. So I didn't drop out right away. I asked them to take a break and they said okay. So I put it on hold and then I came back and I was like, do I see myself coming back? No. And that was where I got in the space I needed to really think about this.
Interesting. Wow. You know, what's so ironic about that story, also, Jewel, the same people that you were in English class with that first, when you first started university, and you said you didn't really jive with them. I bet a bunch of those people ended up in law school.
Yes, you're so right. You called it, man. There were so many people because did you go to grad school? I'm sorry.
I
I
did.
feel okay. So I don't know if grad school has the same kind of comparison data available like law school does, but it'll tell you where your entering GPA is amongst the rest of your peers in that same entering class, like for that year. So my LSATs were really good. Like I think they were in the top like 95%, but my GPA was really low. It was like in the lower 38th percentile because I had a math degree. So I didn't have like a perfect 4.0 like all these English or history majors. So I get to law school and I was like, oh my God, everybody is an English major or a history major or a poli sci major. There were no technical fields, people from the technical fields.
Yeah, yeah. I hear you. And I was, yeah, you mentioned I was in grad school, but what we also have in common is that I dropped out of grad school. So I dropped out of a PhD program after that first year. And well, I'm sure my father's still mad about that. And that was almost 20 years ago now.
Oh my God. Your dad and my dad, they should get together. They can have like a pity party because my parents still ask me about going back to law school.
Wow. It's like it's not too late. You're still alive.
Yep. Yep.
I also mentioned in the intro that you burned out in tech. I'm really curious. What could have been done for you to not have burned out?
Shoot, that is such a good question. No one's ever asked me that. Hmm. There were two major factors. So one, didn't understand the idea of work-life balance. Not really. You grasp it on an intellectual level. I think you know what I mean. You know, ideally, if it's all work and no play, that makes for a sad kid or whatever, whatever the saying is. But on the personal, emotional level, no one teaches you that if you are not fixed in your idea of your self-worth, that it will come out in other ways of you trying to prove your worth through the work you do. And so, how you know this is you is if you get laid off from your job or you're between jobs and your mental health takes it just crashes. It's because when you have no job, you feel no sense of worth. So that was one of the biggest things that if I'd had a mentor to teach me that, that would have been amazing. Uh, a second factor was just being a woman in the tech field. Even though I wasn't in a technical role per se, I was a content manager. So I handled all things content. Being surrounded and then also being one of the few people of color in any job I went to, even though this is the Seattle area is fairly diverse when you're just out walking around, the streets. But when you get into a job, it's not the same. So I joined the startup, I worked at Microsoft, and all my teams were always all white, like all white people. And maybe there'd be like one other Asian or one Black person, but that'd be it. It was a little bit different when I went to Amazon. I saw a lot more Indian people, maybe some more Asian people, but still predominantly white. Like I joined the team at Amazon and it was all white people. So there's a sense of you feeling like you don't belong. And again, if you don't have your sense of worth settled within yourself, you will try to go above and beyond the extra mile in your work. In all these little ways, you'll force yourself to do things that you don't really want to do because you're trying to belong. You're trying to prove that you deserve being given this job. You're trying to prove, hey, I should be here with you guys. I deserve to be here. You'll go to those happy hours or those outside work get togethers because you feel that pressure. So I would say that was number two. And then number three was no people skills. I had no people skills back then. So I was a people pleaser and I would just go from being like extremely accommodating, like way too accommodating, taking on other people's stuff. Again, I've already, explained the reasons why, but I just didn't know how to say no. And so when I think back on like those 20 years ago or the 15 years ago, I was like, gosh, if I'd had a mentor to tell me, you know what, it's hard enough being a woman in these kind of roles in these companies, but then being a woman of color and then being younger and then not having your sense of identity settled, like all of those things kind of come crashing together. Yeah, hence the burnout.
Oh, okay, I get it. Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, I'm sorry that it came to that, but I'm not sorry that you eventually found something that you really enjoy doing, which is being a life coach. So, what is a life coach, and what made you decide to do that?
What is a life coach? A life coach is someone, ideally, if they've been through a training program. So, this is one of those things where I'm not sure if people know this. We're not like therapists, where therapists, you have to go to school. It's like a government regulated certification or licensed thing. You get to call yourself a therapist or a counselor. But in the life coaching field, there's no such thing. It's not government regulated at all. So you could theoretically, which I see all the time, is people will be like, okay, I'm going to be a life coach with zero training. So I'm not talking about people like that. And, admittedly, there are plenty of people who kind of came up through it on their own and they figured out how to accomplish the same goals. And I'm like, kudos to you. But for most of us, a life coach is somebody who's been trained in the art of inquiry and reflection. Like that's essentially what I would say. And there's a lot of parallels here with therapists because at the end of the day, for both of us, our job is to hold up a mirror to you and show you what you're doing. What kind of choices are you making? And it's not on us to judge that for you. It's based off of what you've told us. And based off of what you've told us, we may help you connect the dots a little bit better. So what I like to tell a lot of my new clients is just imagine we're putting together a puzzle. Okay. And so you'll pull some pieces out, we'll put them on the table and we'll look at them, we'll see how the pieces fit. And then when enough pieces are put on the table, we'll start to see the overall picture it's making. And do you like that picture is the question. Is this what you want? So this is where the path of like a therapist and a coach diverge. So a therapist will be more about, okay, so what was it in your history, in your past that have led you to this picture? Whereas a coach will be like, okay, so there were definitely some stuff touching upon your past that have led you here, but where do you want to go in the future? What choices might you want to change to get to where you want to be?
Okay, that's a great, that's an interesting definition and well explanation of what a life coach is. Because I think a lot of times people hear these terms and they're not exactly sure what they mean, but they're trained in inquiry and reflection. I think those are two traits that I think anybody could really benefit from. I think a lot of times we're so reactive when it comes to our lives. We just kind of go along with whatever's happening, but we don't really stop to think about why we do what we do. And I think that could be really helpful when you become a lot more, I guess, and I don't want to use the word intentional. I can't think of a better word though, because that word's used so often. But when you become, I guess, more intentional about why you do what you do, and then when you figure that out, well, then even during those hard times and when there are roadblocks, you're still willing to push through them because you know why you're doing what you're doing. So yeah, kudos to you for the work that you do. I'm sure that it's really helpful to people.
Well, thank you. And not just to push through why you're doing something. Sometimes it'll be like you and me. You dropped out of your PhD program. I dropped out of law school. And these are the kind of choices or the pivot points that a coach will help you come to. And maybe in a less reactive way, like what I went through and maybe what you went through. I have no idea. Like, what did make you drop out of grad school?
I never wanted to be there in the first place. I mean, I mentioned that when I did engineering because my father said I should. So when I was done the engineering program, the undergrad program, he said I should do a master's. And then I did that too. And then he said I should do a PhD. So by this time, I'm not an 18-year-old freshman anymore. I'm 25 years old. So this is like 7 years later. And I'm starting to think, do I actually want to be here? I mean, with undergraduate programs, they can be finished in 4 years. With master's programs, they could be finished in two. But with PhDs, they take as long as they take. You could be there, 3 years, 4, 5, 6. I mean, it all depends on the advisor you have and your committee and if your research is going well. And I just remember after that first year thinking, do I really want to do however many years of this that I'm being told I have to do? And not only that, but I'm doing it because someone else told me to do it, not because it was my own idea. And the answer was no, no, I don't. so so I dropped out, and that was almost 20 years ago now.
Wow, that is so unusual. Like you thinking through that process. Did you have people or friends you talked about this with?
No, no. I mean, if anything, the reaction I got was, "Are you sure you want to do this?" I mean, and but it really was. I mean, also a lot of the guys that I went to undergrad with, they had jobs now and they were living lives and buying homes and doing all the things that adults do. And I'm in grad school still eating noodles and ketchup. Can't even afford the damn steak. Can't even afford chicken, and chicken's cheap. But I had to get my protein from beans, and they're eating steak tartare. I was jealous too, so there's a bit of that as well. But ultimately, it came down to this was really never really my idea to be here. And then also, there's also something else. There must be something else out there that I would want to choose that I would want to do, and that's basically what it came down to.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you correctly, it's not even like you knew what that something else out there was at that point. You just knew that there would be something better and you chose to leave.
Yeah, I mean, whatever I was going to choose, at least it was me choosing it, as opposed to somebody else saying this is what you should do.
Okay, so that's the second point that's really unusual about you. Like, this is so cool. So, one, the fact that you took the time to step back and like really ask yourself, is this what I want? Most people out there never ask themselves that. And so, for instance, when I work with my clients today, you know what the hardest question I ask them is? What do you want? And you know what people answer with is like a whole bunch of what I don't want. Where most of us are just not very good at thinking about the idea of what is it that I want. Most of us tend to think in the negative. I don't want this. I don't like that. I don't like that. And I'm like, okay, still not answering the question. And maybe that helps narrow down the field a little bit. But the whole idea of what I want is really scary for people. And so that's what I mean is like, you're really unusual because the other part that I notice in my clients is that they have a very hard time making the leap or pivoting without a clear plan in mind. They have to know I'm going to go in this direction. Like if I'm going to leave the PhD program, it'll be because I'm going to go to a job at PwC or something, without having that end destination in mind, like a lot of people struggle. So they won't leave because the sense of safety is at risk.
I see what you're saying there, but I certainly didn't have a plan. In fact, once I left the program, I moved back in with my father into his condo, living in his spare room, and I was there for about 7 months before I got a job working at a startup as a research associate, and that's really what started the whole, I guess my whole working life. But that those 7 months, they were kind of rough. I mean, I didn't even unpack my stuff when I first moved back into his condo. I kept it all in the luggage because I thought, well, I'm not going to be here long, so why bother unpacking? But then 1 month turned into two, which turned into three, turned into four. And then I thought, well, maybe I should unpack some things. But luckily, it didn't take a full year. Once I got that job after 7 months, I'm like, oh, thank God, I'm out of here.
Oh my gosh, 7 months. Yeah, I feel like that's actually like a good length of time for you to have settled some stuff. And I can see the thing about not unpacking. Like I've done that too before, thinking, why bother? And then I'm there for way longer than I thought. So 7 months for you, it took me 2 years after law school to get my first job. I was just like spinning my wheels.
Oh, what'd you do for 2 years?
So this is not something I share all over the place, but for maybe like over a year, I was actually playing World of Warcraft.
Oh, okay. That's
And
interesting.
not making any money, but I was playing it like it was a full-time job, and I knew what I was doing. It was a coping thing. The feeling like I had failed out of law school, even though my grades were really good, but feeling like a failure. I even remember to this day when I tried to talk to some of my classmates about leaving law school, and their body language was like literally like edging away, like, there's something wrong with you. I don't want to be around that in case it's contagious. So I'm just gonna, I'm gonna stay over here. So it was a rough time for me. My mom semi disowned me. Like she said some awful things. She called me human garbage for dropping out of law school. And there was so much pressure. So I think World of Warcraft was my thing to just ostrich head in the sand, which I think that's not really a thing, but you get what I mean. Is I was just very, very busy ignoring real life. So racked up a ton of credit card debt in that time. Yeah, that's how I was living. You're talking about the cup noodles. I'm like, that was me for like that whole first year plus.
Wow, that's quite a journey. But another thing I've noticed about this podcast and about this YouTube channel is being able to speak to people like you, people that started off somewhere, one place, and ended up somewhere completely different. And I hope that for the people who are listening or viewing this conversation, Jule, is that they get that just because you started off somewhere, just because someone said you should do this, doesn't mean you have to continue to do that. We have one life to live, and man, we're going to be working for like 30, 40 years in some instances. I mean, ultimately, are you doing something that you actually want to do, or are you doing something because someone else told you to do it? You're living up to someone else's expectations. You think that you have to stay there because that's what you studied in school. Well, no, no, and no. You can do whatever you want. You can make pivots whenever you want. As I said, it's your life. You do with it what you please. This has been a great conversation, Jule. Thank you so much for being a guest. How can people get in touch with you?
My favorite way for people to get in touch with me is on LinkedIn, which I believe is how you and I connected as well. So reach out to me on LinkedIn, Jule Kim. You'll find me there. I'm all over socials. You'll find me on TikTok and Instagram, but LinkedIn is the best way, or my website, adviceactually.com. And, just I cannot say thank you for the conversation. And I fully agree with what you just said about, think about what is it that you want. And especially if you're going to be working for around 34 years of your life. And I'll add this one piece that I've noticed too. There's a misconception out there that you should find the one thing and only do that one thing for your entire working career. And to do more than one thing is somehow like there's something wrong with you. I've experienced this from a bunch of my friends and family. I'm sure you have too. And then the other thing I've noticed too, especially with the Gen Z or like the younger millennials, is this idea that not only are you supposed to find the one thing, but you're supposed to find it now. And I'm like, you're 23, you know nothing. Like you've barely experienced life. So just chill, relax, take it in, and enjoy the ride.
Yeah, 100%. Well, everyone, this marks the end of another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Thanks and have a great day. Thank you, Jule.
Thank you, Neil.